You're listening to a podcast from BBC Radio 4 with me, Sunil Kilnani. Welcome to Incarnations, the story of India told through the lives of 50 individuals from ancient to modern who've made the world's biggest democracy what it is today. This is Bhimrao Ambedkar, Building Palaces on Dung Heaps. A village in South India. Children are passing by on a cart. The people living here are Dalits, a word derived from Sanskrit meaning broken or shattered. They belong to a caste previously known as untouchable, a term applied to the people who traditionally performed menial tasks, which carried a stigma. There are around 170 million Dalits in India, representing about 1/6 of the population, who even today face discrimination and exclusion from the rest of society. At the entrance to the village is a platform, painted blue, around 12 feet high, and on it is a statue of a bespectacled man in a three-piece suit. Tucked under his arm is a book, and his right hand is pointing upwards. Bhimrao Ambedkar was one of India's so-called untouchables, and author of the Indian Constitution, a man celebrated here in song.
We want untouchability to be abolished, you see. But we also want, you see, that we must be given equal opportunities, you see, so that we may rise to the level of the other classes.
That call for equal opportunity was not some minor grievance. More than half a century later, caste discrimination remains an issue in India, and Ambedkar's message is still incendiary. A young man was recently beaten to death in a small town in Maharashtra because of a ringtone on his phone, a song praising Ambedkar. You'll find Ambedkar's face on a poster, painting, or coloured tile in tens of millions of Dalit homes. To Indian school children, he's the man who wrote the country's constitution. And to India's politicians, he's a public emblem of how far we've come in addressing the blight of caste, and how central the state and politics are to that rectification. But both readings simultaneously exaggerate and ghettoize Ambedkar's contribution. He was a sophisticated, long-sighted constitutional thinker, whose interests extended past caste to the very structure and psychology of Indian democracy. Ambedkar was born in Maharashtra in 1891. His family belonged to a small outcast elite, the Mahars, favoured by the British, who found them ideal material for military service and offered westernized schooling for their children. Bhimrao was the last of the couple's 14 children, and he too got such an education. It was an opportunity that fewer than 1% of untouchables had at that time. His mother died when he was young, and his father, Ramji, supervised his education. Ramji was the head of a military school in a garrison town in central India, and he would rouse his son at 2 a.m. to study for exams. There was another side to Ambedkar's education. His father had known the social reformer Jyotirao Phule and taught his son to see untouchability, the code that translated in a young man's life to being barred from drinking from certain wells, eating with schoolmates, or studying Sanskrit, as an outrage to be challenged. By his teenage years, the boy's intellectual abilities had drawn the attention of the Maharaja of Baroda, a lower caste from a royal dynasty of the Marathas, who was eager to train gifted non-Brahmins to serve in his administration. He helped Ambedkar to attend Bombay's prestigious Elphinstone College, and after his graduation in 1912, to further his education at Columbia University in New York. Those New York years are often treated cosmetically in India, as if they primarily taught Ambedkar how to rock blue suits. But there he began an intellectual and political career that would evolve into a groundbreaking analysis of caste. Seeing his homeland from a distance, he viewed India as built on a foundation of oppression rooted far deeper than the political rule of the Raj. To Ambedkar, the caste system was generated by the exclusionary social and kinship rules of the priestly caste, the Brahmins, and it spread because other groups, especially those lowest down in the order, aped the Brahmins' precepts. They did so believing spiritual or social benefits might come to them too. And this analysis would lead to a crucial insight, that the caste hierarchy could enforce itself with minimal physical coercion. It operated largely by voluntary submission, based on what Ambedkar brilliantly describes as an ascending scale of reverence and a descending scale of contempt.
All have a grievance against the highest and would like to bring about their downfall, but they will not combine. The higher is anxious to get rid of the highest, but does not wish to combine with the high. The low would not make a common cause with the lower. Each class being privileged, every class is interested in maintaining the system.
By the time Ambedkar had come back to India in 1923, in his early 30s, to call him the first untouchable to receive a PhD would really have done him down. He'd also passed the bar, and he was on his way to receiving his second PhD from the London School of Economics. But if his economic, social science, and legal training outmatched the elites he was about to contend with, what American minorities refer to as the requirement that they be twice as good to get half as much, Indian life was doing its part to keep his anger fresh. He had to quit a coveted position as military secretary in the Maharaja Baroda's administration when he was rendered homeless. No landlord was willing to rent to an untouchable. Ambedkar now wanted to take on the whole edifice from the bottom. In caste Hindu quarters, that made him a despised figure, which in turn made him more impatient and defiant. Yogendra Yadav is a social scientist and politician.
Ambedkar made caste speakable. Ambedkar gave a voice, not just to Dalits, but to anyone who was at the receiving end of the caste system.
Ambedkar would learn only after failure to take the long view. A crucial lesson came in 1927 when he led a march for water access in a caste-ridden Maharashtra town. After he drank from the local tank and claimed victory, upper caste Hindus attacked the protesters, who were later further ostracized for their activism. The realization was probably fortunate for modern India, since mass organization was never Ambedkar's strength. Over the next decades, he started a sequence of associations, federations, political parties, pressure groups, and campaigns. Some worked. He popularized the term Dalit, broken men, with the hope of eliminating his followers' self-image as untouchable, polluting persons. Some may revile him, but today Ambedkar is regarded by Dalit activists like Asha Kautal as an inspiration.
As Dalits, we have today not just our right to vote or our right to exist, the kind of voice that we have today, we would not be able to gather, we would not be able to protest, we would not be able to demand for our rights the way in which we are able to do now in India and across the borders of India. It's only because of the work that he did at that time.
But the remnants of Ambedkar's life in Bombay suggest an intellectual life which consisted of more than just earnest campaigning. In Ambedkar's house in Dadar, there are some of his old books. There's the Code of Civil Procedure of 1908. There's The Essence of Buddhism, Lyon's Medical Jurisprudence, Humor Among the Lawyers. Now that's an unusual book to find here on Ambedkar's shelves. Humor of the Bench, Humor in the Witness Box. The dock is the place. In 1930, as part of the British plan to gradually give India more self-government, leaders of different communities were invited to discuss a future constitution for India under Dominion status. Jinnah was plucked to represent Muslims, and Ambedkar to represent untouchables nationwide, a significant social promotion for a man little known outside his region. His bell-clear argumentative skills got him invited back to the next year's round table, where he began an intellectual battle with Gandhi that would last until the end of the Mahatma's life. Ambedkar considered him a caste orthodox in a democratic reformer's clothing, scant as Gandhi's might be.
As I met Mr. Gandhi in the capacity of an opponent, I have a feeling that I know him better than most other people because he had opened his real fangs to me, you see.
How did such a latecomer to nationalism and opponent of Gandhi come to have so central a role in modern India? India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, never fully trusted Ambedkar, and the feeling was mutual. But Ambedkar, vexing as he was to some, had intellectual skills that Nehru and the senior Congress leadership required in the blood-dark wake of partition. Ambedkar wasn't only a Dalit representing a vulnerable community. He showed himself able to think across a range of issues and to ask about the consequences, intended and otherwise, that various laws might have for the society as a whole. Yogendra Yadav.
Ambedkar was perhaps the first thinker in India who seriously reflected about political consequences of laws, constitutions, rules. For example, whether Indian states should be reorganized on linguistic basis or not. He thought very carefully about India's partition. He, of course, thought about the regime of rights. He thought about the design of legislature. In that sense, I think it's fair to say that Dr. Ambedkar was the first democratic theorist in our country.
Hence, in 1947, after partition plans nullified Ambedkar's seat in the Constituent Assembly, Nehru and Rajendra Prasad, leader of the Assembly and later India's first president, scrambled to keep him involved. By August, Ambedkar had been given the chairmanship of the committee drafting the Constitution.
Apart from any other consideration, we have found Dr. Ambedkar's work, both in the Constituent Assembly and the various committees to which he was appointed, to be of such an order as to require that we should not be deprived of his services.
Ambedkar lost many battles over specific provisions to help minorities, but caste discrimination was outlawed, and reservation or affirmative action was established, giving Dalits and others defined as economically backward preferential access to government employment and educational institutions. Today, the demand for affirmative action is coming from all quarters, including from some of the most privileged. Caste groups like this one demonstrating in Gujarat compete and sometimes campaign violently to be defined as backward in order to benefit from reservations, which today apply to just under half of all positions in India's national government institutions. Reservations designed to erode caste identities and fortify individual citizens have reinvigorated caste categories, now defined by the state. As a result of his role in creating these rights, all India's political parties, including those whose views he opposed, now claim Ambedkar. He's become a necessary electoral magnet for any politician who wants the votes of the dispossessed. Ambedkar lived only 6 years beyond the promulgation of the Constitution in January 1950. He was under no illusion that Indian equality was closing in. And without addressing inequality between classes and between women and men, simply putting faith in economic progress was, he said, to make a farce of our Constitution and to build a palace on a dung heap. Alone of all India's founders, he recognized the importance of fraternity, the ability to treat each other with dignity, as fundamental to the creation of a political community. Without fraternity, Ambedkar reminded his fellow Indians, equality and liberty will be no deeper than coats of paint. You've been listening to Incarnations, a BBC radio...